Lovely Traces of Hope, Chapter 13. Take off your clothes. Barb sat across from me at the table at Panera over a cup of coffee. The first 12 chapters you write are as if you are standing among us naked and unashamed. I almost blushed when Barb spoke, suddenly feeling very vulnerable. She continued, but in this last part, it's as if you put your clothes on. You become something else, a teacher, a coach, someone who invests in the lives of others, but not going deep, not being personal or sharing intimately yourself. I'd been working on this manuscript for a while now. I shared my first draft with 6 women I trust with my life. The comments I got helped me know if I had communicated what I hoped. But Barb showed me what I was or wasn't saying. I had quit being transparent and telling my story and started to act as if I had figured it out, why this had happened to Leisha or to me. Immediately, I knew she was right. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Act 1 introduces the hero or the heroine, her backstory sets up the inciting incident she must overcome. Act 2, the heroine begins her journey and wrestles with what is it going to take to accomplish the task and be victorious. Act 3, the heroine wins. She proves she has overcome, learned the lesson, and completed the quest. I looked back over the manuscript. My Act 1 was actually in 4 parts. I introduced my family, shared some of our backstory. Each chapter and story within a story led up to the inciting incident of Leisha's death. When I think back to all that's included in Act 1, the memories are in full color. Yes, there are hard times, but they're surrounded by light in my recall of them. I can write about them in vivid detail because I can see the moments. I can describe what happened even now. But as I began to write the next part, I pondered what Barb meant when she said, I put my clothes on. Each time I tried to write these chapters, I tried to prove that I had learned the lesson. For the next 10 weeks, I attempted to be more real about that painful part of my story. It slowly dawned on me that I was trying to write Act 3 as if the story was complete and the lessons were learned without writing an Act 2. I was determined that if I had to hurt this bad, that I would learn all I needed to learn to help someone else. Maybe I could keep them from hurting as bad as I was hurting. I wanted to be enlightened so I could move on quickly. So I tried to skip Act 2 altogether and go right into Act 3. But you can't skip Act 2. No one can. I can't tell the story of how I overcame the pain until I identify the pain. I can't resolve the problem without recognizing the problem and what it's going to take to overcome. I was mad that I couldn't just say I was done, not just with the writing of this book, but with the journey. But I was also determined that I wouldn't let this book go to print without attempting to be real with myself, whether I ever shared it with you, the reader, or not. I had to be transparent enough to remember what really happened during a dark time, not just for me, but for you. How can I let you think that I figured it out and moved on when I continue to wrestle with the ache and the longing I feel? How can I write as one with all the answers when I'm filled with more questions from the core of my being? I had to know. I had to take off my clothes and acknowledge what the real story was during that time. What was my story in the darkness? So I just opened my hands and said, Lord, please help me remember the things I need to know. Teach me what it is I need to learn from it and what I need to share with others. Looking back at the days, weeks, and months after Leisha's death, all I see is a dark palette, almost completely black. At first, this was all I saw, darkness, up close. But as I leaned into the darkness, I began to see traces of light, as if suddenly on a dark night, the clouds parted and the stars began to shine through. When I pressed my eye into the tunnel of black and embraced the sliver of hope that was lighting my way, I began to see parts of my story more clearly. Things that happened, images I had seen, people who cared, and lessons I learned were all part of the grief and the growth of that moment. All of it is shrouded in black, even still in my memory. Yet as I pressed closer to the light, I began to see those moments when God broke into my world, or when he didn't. At least when he didn't show up in a way I expected to see him. But to tell you about what I experienced is a different matter. We've all fallen and skinned our knee, bruised our hearts. I have to make sure. Brene Brown says in her book, Rising Strong, the scars are easier to talk about than they are to show, with all the remembered feelings laid bare. Rarely do we see wounds that are in the process of healing. I'm not sure if it's because we feel too much shame to let anyone see a process so intimate as overcoming hurt, or if it's because even when we must muster the courage to share our still incomplete healing, people reflexively look away. Yes, that I could identify. There was great vulnerability, and yes, sometimes shame in the way I processed my grief. Brene's words resonated loud in my spirit as I read. I wish I could say I did it all right. I wish I could say I always believed God to be the blessed controller of all things and therefore trusted him completely, but I didn't. I wish I could say I had overcome my grief, but even now I have to ask, have I? Would I want to? Actually, it's true. There's part of me that feels too much shame to let anyone see my process that was so intimate to me. But I'm also afraid if I muster up the courage to share what I know is still incomplete in me, will you dare to stay with me? To keep reading? To keep walking with me through this journey? There are times when my friends have experienced a great loss and I sat with them in their moment of deepest grief as their pastor's wife or a coach or just a friend. There are times when their loss felt so painful that I had to look away. I didn't want to look away. I tried not to, but I couldn't imagine what they were feeling, and I didn't want to know that kind of pain. We tend to prefer stories that have drama, some point of intersection of pain with the leading character, but we always want that to end quickly and find a resolution so we can say, yay, they overcame. They made up, they kissed, they discovered the treasure, they solved the mystery, they made it. Brene writes, we like recovery stories to move quickly through the dark so we can get to the sweeping redemptive ending. That's what I was doing. I tried to write Act 3 without identifying how I got there. That's why I still struggle. I can't get there. Even now, as I write, it's been almost 10 years since my daughter died, yet I've spent these last couple of months back in a grief place. It's not what it once was. It's different now, but it's still a dark place, a place where I can't move or I can't think or write. I can barely breathe. I want to be at that sweeping redemptive ending, and I'm not there. I want to tell you my story in a way that tells you I made it. I want to shout, God was enough, big enough, present enough, strong enough. Yet I'm writing about a time in my life when I wasn't sure any of that was true. I didn't know if I could make it through the grief tunnel. I doubted if God was indeed who he said he was. That's not the kind of stuff you want to admit in a book called Lovely Traces of Hope. I didn't see it then. I sometimes struggle to remember it now. But healing is a progression. Unless we embrace the dark tunnel, the loss, the failure, we can't acknowledge the traces of hope that help us deal with the real hurt and the fear that it can cause. We're just putting our clothes on, not in a sense to be modest, but to remain hidden. I put my clothes on because I didn't want to be that vulnerable with you. Yet even that is a lie. I didn't want to be vulnerable at all. I wanted to jump right to Act 3 with resolutions and answers instead of having to deal with the pain or the questions. Act 2 is the time after Alicia died. There I see mostly darkness. That's how it looks in a tunnel of mud that swallows a person whole. That kind of heartbreak not only knocks the wind out of you, it leaves you unable to breathe. There's no light. There's no way to move. Could I go through that place and ever feel life again? Would I ever be able to let my daughters or my husband leave the house without fearing I might not see them again? Would I be able to breathe again without having to tell myself to do it? I spent a great deal of time wondering if I really wanted to go back there to a place of feeling the pain again. It's not like I hadn't felt it the first time, but I hadn't let it do its work. I waved it away, hoping not to feel it anymore or convey it had not changed me. Only it had. It changed me. The pain and loss have made me different. But so did the love and the relationship with my daughter. To accept one aspect means I must respect the other and embrace the whole of the picture. It's a hard place, but it can be good. My version of the story transformed. I struggled with whether I could share Act 2 with you, the reader, but to not go there means I didn't tell you the real story. And perhaps if I find the courage to look into my darkness and find the traces of hope that show me the real story, you can too. This isn't the first draft that Barb read. These next chapters tell of my incomplete journey to embrace the loss, the pain, the darkness. They speak to the questions that remain unanswered. They invite each of us to lean into all that is real, to find lovely traces of faith, of hope, of love. Lean in, my friend. I need to tell you Act 2.